Most of us assume money buys peace. Once the bills are handled and one bad month can no longer wreck your life, sleep should come easier. So when we imagine a billionaire going to bed, we picture the calmest night possible. A private bedroom, perfect temperature, medical help nearby, and zero reason to worry about tomorrow's expenses. But that's exactly where the illusion starts to crack. Extreme wealth does remove ordinary problems. Then it creates a strange kind of pressure. At that level, life doesn't necessarily become simpler. It becomes harder to turn off. Because the moment someone has almost everything, sleep is no longer interrupted by what they lack. It's interrupted by how much there's to lose, and some of that loss can begin while they are still asleep. A billionaire's fortune is rarely a pile of cash sitting quietly somewhere. It's usually tied to companies, stock prices, loans, lawsuits, regulations, public confidence, and timing. In other words, the number can change while they are asleep. But the number is only part of it. When a billionaire loses billions on paper, it doesn't stay private. First, it becomes a headline. Then the internet turns it into a joke, and before long, employees are whispering about it before the next meeting. That's the fresh cruelty of extreme wealth. Even a bad day becomes content. Investor patience can disappear after a weak quarter. A lawsuit can bring old enemies back into the room. One ugly headline can turn years of image building into a public debate about whether the billionaire was ever as brilliant as people thought. Behavioral psychology calls this loss aversion. Losses tend to sting more than equivalent gains feel good. For an ordinary investor, that might mean checking a retirement account too often. For someone at the very top, the loss isn't only financial. It threatens the story people tell about them. Are they still a genius? Are they still in control? Are they still untouchable? Those questions are brutal because public status is much harder to stabilize than a stock price. So the thought at night isn't simply, will I end up with nothing? It's, what happens if the world changes its mind about me? And once a person's life is tied to a giant financial machine, sleep doesn't stop the machine from moving. Then, the worry moves closer to home. Stocks can recover, reputations can be rebuilt, and headlines eventually fade. But when wealth starts shaping the people they love, the damage is harder to measure. The next sleepless question becomes, what happens to the children who inherit all of this? Now the problem stops being financial and becomes human. A billionaire can design a trust, structure an estate, and hire the best advisors in the country. But no document can guarantee that a child grows into a grounded adult. The parent's character may have been built through pressure. They had to compete, fail, recover, negotiate, and prove themselves before anyone cared what they had to say. Their children are born into the finished product. They inherit comfort before they inherit discipline. That sounds like a blessing, and in many ways it is. But too much cushioning can quietly remove the friction that teaches a person who they are. The nightmare isn't that the child lacks access. The nightmare is that the child has access to everything except purpose. A wealthy parent can fund the school, the therapist, the travel, the apartment, the second chance, and the fifth chance. But at some point, the parent still has to ask a brutal question. Did I make life easier for my child, or did I make adulthood harder? That question can keep a person awake in a way market volatility never could. A lost investment is painful. A child who never finds direction is personal. And once money starts changing the family, it also changes the way people relate to the person who has it. Extreme wealth changes the social atmosphere around a person. People become careful around power. They soften their opinions, they choose their words, they laugh a little longer than the joke deserves. After enough years, even kindness can start to feel suspicious. Many billionaires are surrounded all day by staff, advisors, investors, assistants, security, and people asking for 5 minutes of their time. But attention isn't intimacy. When someone has billions, every interaction becomes harder to read. A compliment gets filtered. A request gets analyzed. A new friendship arrives with an invisible question mark attached. After a while, the billionaire may still be polite, generous, even charming. But internally, the door isn't fully open. and living that way is exhausting. Deep rest requires a place where a person can be unguarded, not protected by cameras, gates, or lawyers. Just emotionally safe with another human being. When that kind of trust becomes rare, the night gets heavier. People often ask the obvious question. If someone already has more money than they could ever spend, why keep going? Because for some billionaires, stopping doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like an identity crisis. For decades, their life has had a clear scoreboard. Build the company, beat the rival, close the deal, prove the doubters wrong. The game gave them structure, urgency, and a version of themselves they understood. Then one day, the money is no longer the point. But the scoreboard is still there in their head. Without the next target, the silence can become uncomfortable fast. Who are they if they aren't building? Who are they if nobody needs a decision from them? Who are they if the world keeps moving and they're no longer at the center of it? That's why some billionaires keep launching, investing, competing, and saying yes to things they do not financially need. They aren't always chasing another dollar. Sometimes they're trying to avoid the emptiness that appears when the game stops. And that's a different kind of insomnia. Not a body that refuses to sleep. A self-image that refuses to retire. But even the chase has a limit. Because eventually, a person reaches the goal everyone told them would change everything and discovers the finish line isn't what they imagined. The most uncomfortable part of success may be what happens after the celebration ends. Most people get through hard seasons by imagining a future where life finally feels lighter. The first house, the first million, the debt-free moment, the number in the account that finally feels safe. That future goal becomes emotional fuel. But billionaires have already reached the destination society keeps selling to everyone else. And some of them discover something terrifying there. The view isn't enough. The private jet is exciting until it becomes transportation. The mansion is impressive until it becomes home. The number feels unreal until the brain adjusts and quietly asks, now what? Psychologists call this the arrival fallacy, the belief that reaching a major goal will create lasting happiness. Success can feel amazing. It just doesn't keep feeling new. And when the dream came true but the restlessness stayed, the old story began to fall apart. Just get there, and everything will be okay. For years, that sentence may have carried them through stress, sacrifice, and obsession. Losing it can be brutal. Because now the question is no longer, how do I get there? It's, what was I really chasing? That's where sleep becomes difficult. And when old goals stop working, some billionaires reach for the biggest game left, the future itself. In today's tech boom, AI gives some billionaires a very modern reason to lose sleep. It's no longer just about building a faster company. It's about deciding what kind of company should exist when software can do more of the work humans used to do. That sounds exciting in a boardroom. At night, it gets more complicated. A CEO can see the efficiency on one side. Fewer layers, faster output, lower costs, smarter systems. But on the other side are real employees, real families, public backlash, and the ugly question nobody wants to say too loudly. How many people will become unnecessary if this works? That's the part that makes AI different from an ordinary business tool. It forces the people at the top to rethink how the whole machine runs, who gets hired, who gets replaced, what work is still human, and how much criticism they can absorb if the answer saves money but costs jobs. So the sleepless thought isn't some sci-fi fantasy. It's much closer and much more practical. If I don't use AI, my company may fall behind. If I do use it, I may be blamed for what happens to the people it replaces. That's a very modern billionaire problem. And it brings us back to the real question behind this video. So no, billionaires do not lose sleep because money is useless. Money solves real problems. It can make life safer, smoother, and more comfortable in ways most people would absolutely choose. But after the bills are gone, the person is still there. The doubts, the hunger, the relationships, the family, the unfinished question of whether success actually delivered what it promised. Maybe that's the hidden cost of extreme wealth. The outside world can be upgraded completely, while the inner life remains unfinished. So I'll leave you with this. Would you trade ordinary peace for $1 billion life? Or would you rather keep a quiet mind and the normal bed? Tell me in the comments. And if this gives you a different way to think about success, stay around for the next one. Thanks for watching.